I want us to have a discussion today about the state of winning in college football's postseason. Now, if you've been tuned in, you know we already did a segment on the state of college football's playoff and where that's headed. This is not a commentary on the playoff and the structure and what we feel about it expanding. This isn't one of those segments. What I want to talk about together is how do you win now as the path to a national championship has changed? Because in some respects, the path has gotten a lot wider. Like anytime you let more teams on that final path, which isn't that now the 12-team playoff, there's going to be more teams in the fight now. At the exact same time, I would argue the path has also gotten a little bit more steep. You're climbing up a mountain. You know, you got a wide path, but you're still climbing up a mountain. There's still a pretty heavy incline there. So what does it take to win a national championship? What does it take to win in college football's postseason period? The thought I arrived at was the formula to win it all hasn't really changed all that much, but I think the margin for error within that formula and the importance of that formula has been magnified. Because what have you heard so often leading up to the first round of the college football playoff and leading up to national championship games? You hear a lot of talk around, well, hey, Georgia, they're deep. Well, hey, Michigan, we heard this a lot last season. We said this a lot last season. They are as deep as it gets. There's not a tremendous drop-off from ones to twos and then twos to further reserves. Like, they got dudes across the board. They got a lot of dudes on this roster that can play ball for you at a high level. That's always been important. However, now you look at the path to a national championship, you're going to be asking some dudes to play 16 games. It's going to be a pretty strong obstacle course to find your way to hoisting a national championship trophy. The reality is, in a 16-game season, you may need to have your twos playing or a specific player that wouldn't be a starter in a pretty high-impact moment. You might need to have your backup quarterback, your backup offensive tackle playing for you in the semifinals of the college football playoff. In that specific instance, when those scenarios arrive, there can't be this drop-off. You got to have those dudes hold their water, hold steady, and be able to deliver for you on the biggest stage. So depth, absolutely crucial. In the same vein, I think versatility across your roster and versatility as well in play style has never been more important. And it used to be where you wouldn't have to adjust your play style too much, but for maybe one conference game a year, and then when you got to the college football playoff and the national championship game, you'd have to be able to adjust a little bit to the opposition. But in this 12-team playoff, you might need to win a shootout against Ole Miss one week, Lane Kiffin and co., and then you might have to turn around the next week and play a rock fight style game against Michigan. So the way that you build your roster and the way that you're able to scheme it up week in and week out, there's going to be a lot of responsibility now on these coordinators to be able to shapeshift week in and week out, especially in this college football playoff format. Long gone are the days where you can just have one style, one trick pony. That's all you're rolling with. Okay, let's get after it. Those days are gone. Those days are gone. You're going to have to be able to match up with different styles of teams in order to make runs in the college football playoff. Now, here's, I think, one of the more interesting points when it comes to where we're headed in this whole discussion. I think quarterback play will be even further accentuated in this new playoff format than it ever has been. And the reason why I arrive at this thought is because look at the way that the college football playoff is starting to mirror more and more the NFL playoff, just in terms of number of games that you play. When was the last time a mid-NFL quarterback won a Super Bowl? It's been a minute. Y'all that were making Trent Dilfer jokes in the background there, hush, it's not kind. I'm a Trent Dilfer stan. Who wins in the NFL playoffs? Brady, Mahomes, dudes that are dudes at their position, dudes that are guys at the quarterback position. That'd be a great quote graphic, dudes that are guys at their position. We roll along, though. I think in these specific instances, in the college football playoff as it expands, you're going to run into more games where you don't have the same advantage from a roster talent level. You're going to have to play teams that are able to match up on the line of scrimmage, that are able to match up on the perimeter. And so what happens when you have kind of that stalemate from a talent level, you got to go to the individual who touches the football every freaking play for you offensively, your quarterback. And so I think it's going to be a quarterback-driven playoff here, especially when we get down to winning time where it's semifinals, quarterfinals. Like, I think that's where it really, really starts to become intriguing, and that's where you'll really see the great quarterbacks, the elite quarterbacks, elevate their team and start to separate. It's also worth noting, too, even if you don't have that roster talent advantage, which you would like to have, and I think more often than not you'll see the teams that win at the highest level have, you can have the quarterback kind of make up for it in some ways. Like, how often do we talk about Cam Newton and that Auburn team, which I understand this is a different era of college football, but, like, he put that team on his back and drug them to a national championship. Now, were there other good players on that roster? Of course, so I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but I think the same thing can be true in specific instances for certain teams in this playoff. Miami comes to mind. Cam Ward, I promise you, he changes that preseason win total for Miami. Changes it. It's 9.5 right now. Without Cam Ward, what is it, 7.5? And that's not throwing shade at Miami. There's just an understanding now that the quarterback, if you have a quarterback, you have a chance. If you have a quarterback, that might be the answer for you, where maybe you don't have the advantage on other spots across your roster. Now, here's the other thing. Those are kind of the key ingredients to me, I think. Versatility, depth on your roster. You got to have, I think, an elite quarterback. I think the days of being able to win in spite of your quarterback are long behind us in college football. Maturity and culture is going to be very much so exposed in these college football playoffs. They are. And we've seen it a little bit, too. We talked to J.J. McCarthy before last year's national championship game, and he told us, like, yeah, experience as a competitor is your greatest weapon. He was more or less saying, like, that's the reason why we feel good about ourselves walking into this national championship game. But in this new playoff format, I've said it multiple times now, you're going to have to win 3-4 games to go on a run here. The maturity it's going to take and the strong culture it's going to take to not get too high, to not drink your own Kool-Aid, to not read the press clippings, and to be able to just keep the main thing, be businesslike, be robotic in a sense, not be overly emotional, and just handle business every single game. That's asking a lot, especially when you're talking about 18 to 22-year-olds. Like, it is. And there's a reason, too, why psychologically we're seeing this play out in other tournament fashions. Like in March Madness, the most talented team may not always win the tournament. It's the team that's able to play their best every single game, every single week, essentially, weekend rather, in that format. And it's the teams that are able to have the composure and competitive excellence to stay even keel, to not let the moment get too big, and to keep the main thing, keep on rolling. That's going to be the same thing in these college football playoffs. We've seen it previously in a smaller sample size in the 4-team playoff. Georgia, experience one twice. Michigan last year, experience one. We're going to see that. I think teams that make a run will be, one, strong culture, but two, I think have a lot of upperclassmen. Now, notice the teams that we're not talking about here. As we explain this more and more, as we walk it further and further down the road, we're not talking about Cinderella teams. We're not. And I hate to be the one to kind of dunk on any other school that maybe is going to sneak in the college football playoff and be a great story that they made the dance. But, like, football has an emphasis on physical ability as it correlates to success more than any other sport out there. Like, there's no three-point shot that's going to equalize things for you here. There's no ace pitcher that's going to just be able to neutralize your lineup. Like, it is a bully sport. We have more big human beings than you, and we are going to impose our will on you for 4 quarters, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. That is college football. And so the fact that we're going to see that played out in a larger sample size is going to, and again, in my opinion, decrease the amount of teams that are able to go on these Cinderella-esque runs, this G5 team to the playoff. And that's not me throwing shade at the G5. I love the G5, all right? G5, I stand with y'all. But when it comes to the college football playoff, we're not going to see these 3-4 game win streaks that end up having a Cinderella-ish kind of story go win the national championship. The reason why we know that, y'all, we saw it a little bit ago. We saw TCU trot out there against Georgia, be vastly overmatched on the line of scrimmage, and that was pretty much all she wrote. That game was over by halftime. You got Kirby Smart's players grabbing chicken wings off the sideline. Like, they were chilling by the third or fourth quarter because they were physically so superior. And so, again, I am not trying to dunk on any other lower level, quote-unquote, teams that will end up in the college football playoff. I'm all for it. I'm all about it. But we're not going to see these 3-4 games, Cinderella runs by the lower level, quote unquote, teams that make a run at this thing. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.